Hello! In this video I want to talk about Prince Andrew. Some rather embarrassing news came out about Prince Andrew and how he'd had this big squabble with his brother Charles about where he could put his bathroom toiletries, and he didn't want to put them in the other bathroom. He didn't want his brother to have the better bathroom apparently, and this was at the end of the 90s, so he was in his 30s, his I think even his late 30s. I think he might have been 36 then. So and the Queen had to intervene and tell Andrew to stop arguing and to move his stuff out of the bathroom. So, it just seems to be one thing after the other. What I want to focus on today is the argument that Prince Andrew's lawyers are going with regarding Virginia Giuffre about false memories. I haven't made videos for ages, so I just wanted to say that isn't the plan going forward. I've had to deal with a really difficult moving situation. The manager of the building has really been an absolute nightmare, and I had to get a solicitor. One day I will make a video about it because I think he ticked every box for narcissistic behaviour. I'm also going to say something at the end about the last video and the comments under it. It was quite shocking, the kinds of comments that were going on and how angry people were getting. But I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm going to dive into Prince Andrew. Not literally, thankfully. God. Prince Andrew's lawyers are planning to speak to Virginia Giuffre's psychologist and her husband about how she might have had false memories. And I'm surprised at this because of what happened with Ghislaine Maxwell, because that argument didn't work for her. And I wanted to talk about why it didn't work, because I think it's something that so many people can apply to their lives. Gaslighting is so common and a really important part of abuse, a very destructive part. And understanding the truth about false memories is really useful in protecting people from gaslighting. Elizabeth Loftus is a psychologist who's a professor at the University of California, and she's studied memories for 50 years. She's run various studies to prove the existence of false or implanted memories, and she has used those studies to defend different people in court, really big names like O.J. Simpson. She was even consulted on behalf of Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby and even Ted Bundy. This, to me, that in itself is just kind of really bizarre and interesting, to try and get your head around. It turned out she herself was actually abused in childhood. So it's really curious to me that this is what she's ended up doing with her career, is standing up for people who've been accused of sexually abusing other people, especially children and underage people. The argument that was used in Ghislaine Maxwell's case was that the women who called themselves victims of Epstein's abuse were actually not abused by him, and they came forward because they'd convinced themselves it had happened because they knew that a lot of money could be on offer. And so the lure of that money had led to them not actually lying apparently, but just genuinely believing that they were abused. The study that Loftus talked about, and the one that made everyone aware that false memories exist, was done on participants who were told by their parents that they had been lost as a child in a shopping centre. They actually had not been lost in a shopping centre, but their parents were told to tell them that they had been. And what happened was many of them ended up believing that had really happened and having a memory of it happening. So their imagination was mistaken for a memory. But what wasn't taken into account by Elizabeth Loftus in her studies was that there's a difference between memories of traumatic events and memories of benign events. Elizabeth Loftus has used that study many times to try to convince a jury that someone wasn't abused. Apparently 149 times she's been an expert witness for the defendant. And as a result of the work she's done, it's become more and more well known that people can imagine horrific things happening to them when they haven't really happened. And so it's made it a lot harder for victims of abuse to come forward. Thankfully, this time around, a different psychologist who had done a different study was cited. This psychologist is Kathy Pesdek, and she is also a professor at another university in California. She's from Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. And Kathy Pesdek has done a very useful study in which she's tried to convince people that they have had a rectal enema when they in fact haven't. And no matter how many times they were told they'd had one, the participants had no memory of having had one. And so this shows that when something more traumatic happens, and a rectal enema would be more traumatic, it would be, because it's very invasive and can be physically uncomfortable. Traumatic memories are different. All right, darling. Say hello to everyone. You've been such a good boy, being so quiet, lying on the floor, haven't you? Yes, you have. You've been so good and quiet, haven't you? What are you going to do next? Are you going to play with something? Okay, I can hear you. I cannot hear you. So, it's a bit distracting because I've got him on my knee and he's just staring up at me, purring really loudly. Another study that Elizabeth Loftus cited in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial was one where participants were shown a traffic accident on a video, and then they were asked what they remembered of it. And they were shown a stop sign, and then they were later told it was a yield sign. And a lot of them believed, after being told multiple times that it was a yield sign, a lot of them believed that they remembered it was a yield sign. So she tried to use that, but she wasn't talking about the main event. And nobody asked her in court whether these participants could have been persuaded that a crash didn't happen if they'd been told enough times. The defense argued that when you have a traumatic memory, the core element of that memory, that the most important thing that happened won't be forgotten. So when it comes to traumatic memories, there's no evidence to suggest people can invent them in their heads. And this couldn't be proven in court, which is why Ghislaine Maxwell didn't get off. So while the elements around it might be harder to remember, the exact details that aren't so important, just like any other benign memory, you might be able to forget them, or you might be persuaded that you remember something differently. That's not the case when it comes to the most important part of a traumatic memory. I don't know why Prince Andrew's lawyers are about to repeat what we've already seen for Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know why they think that they're going to have a chance of convincing people that that these were false memories again, that had just been invented accidentally. Or how they think that her psychologist is going to convince people of that. I know that they also want any medication she's been on to be made a part of the trial. So many people have attempted to come forward to parents when they've been sexually abused as children, and they've been told that it's not true, that they've imagined it or they've made it up and they're lying, often because they just don't want to believe it's true. And that has such serious consequences for those children. But it's another thing when that child grows up and people tell him or her that the memories that they're having are just dreams, or it's just their imagination. Gaslighting has a huge impact on people, as they go through their lives, on their relationships, on who they can trust, on being able to trust themselves, on setting boundaries. None of that is possible if you don't believe in your own experiences and in your own memories. So there's so much power in telling someone they've imagined something. And it's really important to be able to trust your memories. Isn't it, baby? Isn't it, sweetheart? It's going to be like there's a big engine in the room on this video, isn't it? Traumatic memories behave very differently from benign memories because you can have flashbacks. You know, parts of them can suddenly flash into your head and you can remember them without choosing to. People can be doubtful about memories from long ago, especially traumatic ones, because of the way they dart in and out of their brains, you know, because they don't necessarily have a very clear memory of the beginning right through to the end of that experience. It can be all chopped up. And so, and that can encourage us to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't take that seriously then, because I don't remember every part of it. Maybe it is imagined. And people who don't want to experience the horrible feelings they'll have when they accept that it's true that that happened, they can go along with that. They can encourage you to believe it didn't happen. So if you experience something traumatic, even if you don't always remember it, even if you occasionally have flashbacks, I would be very skeptical of anyone who tells you that you're imagining that that happened, because there's no evidence to suggest that that is true. There is evidence to suggest the opposite is true, that traumatic memories are seared into our brains and they will come up at the most inopportune times, that the core memory, the most important, the most traumatic parts are not forgotten. And even when you can't remember them, your body will tend to remember them. That trauma is still stored inside you. So just bear in mind that actually you can trust yourself, and that just because you might change your mind about the details, that doesn't mean that the most important part was made up. The last video I put out had lots of stressed out comments underneath it from people who took offense to that video. So I have thought about making a video about that, but I'm not really sure about how helpful it would be. I guess it would feel maybe a bit repetitive of what I've already said in the video. So a lot of people were jumping on the fact that I said that I'd been vaccinated and I believe in getting vaccinated, and suggesting that I was saying that anyone who didn't believe in that was stupid, which I never said at any point in the video. And they were also coming up with their own conspiracy theories, and deciding that I was against all of them when I didn't even talk about any of them in the video. I was thinking to make a video really, I guess, as a part 2 to talk about those comments in relation to what I've talked about already. And again, that was because there's a parallel between that happening in this situation, which I think was fairly innocent. I don't think those people were intentionally misunderstanding me, you know, but there's a parallel that I think we can draw between that and abusive behavior, when somebody really does intentionally talk rubbish at you and they pretend to be really sure of their opinions. And another thing that I thought was quite interesting was that the video actually got about 85% likes. You can't see that because you can't see the dislikes. They're not shown by YouTube. All of my videos will have between 1 and 3% dislikes. I guess it's about 13% maybe more dislikes on that video. But if you look in the comment section, you wouldn't know that, because the most vocal people are the people who don't agree with the video. And I have the feeling that the people who do agree with the things I said, a lot of them don't want to take part in those discussions because it's too stressful when you're not going to be heard. So you don't have to be, I mean, I've got clients who can't read the comments because they find them too triggering. One of my clients is a doctor, so I can understand how triggering that would be. And she sent me this. I can read them, but it does annoy me when I feel like people have got something very wrong. I think that's just human nature. But that's different from attacking people in the comment section. So let me know if you want me to make that video. It will probably mean a lot more angry comments, but I'm prepared to do it if you think it's going to be helpful. I'm going to be putting out another video as soon as I can, but definitely within this week. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you then.